Good evening. I'd like to call to order the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education. It is April 12th, 2022, and we're meeting in a blended format on this beautiful day with some of us in person at Casco Bay High School and others joining via Zoom. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Bondo.
Présent.
Mr. Burke.
Here.
Ms. Russell Better.
Here.
Ms. Biliou. Mr. Youssef.
Here.
Ms. Ellis. Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. Alzamili. Ms. Santiago. Ms. Diu.
Here.
And Chair Figdor.
Here. And I see Ms. Biliou is here on Zoom, and that Mr. Alzamili, excuse me, is here but as an attendee. So if we can move him over to a panelist, please.
And Ms. Biliou is here.
Okay. With that, I invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Portland Public Schools recognizes the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand, the Willis-Teigig, or Maliseet, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes, known collectively as the Wabanaki Confederacy, or people of the Dawnland. We are honored to have Wabanaki children among our students today, and as a district, we are committed to making the past, present, and future of Wabanaki peoples visible in our schools and classrooms. So to begin this evening's meeting, we are starting with public comment on items that we are not voting on today. So we actually aren't voting on any substantive issues today. So we'll take public comment on any issue. So if you are a member of the public and would like to address the board, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom or come to the front of the room, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. And if you can start by stating your name and your address. Okay, we're going to start with someone here in the room. Please go ahead.
The only one in person from the public here tonight. The name is John Russo. The address is 1455 Riverton Road here in Portland. And so unfortunately, I missed last month's budget meeting. I also have a couple other comments, feedbacks, concerns that I'd like to try to address in front of the board. As well as you, Mr. Superintendent. So first up for me is last couple of meetings I've been to, I hear about the COVID-19. And the only two measures that I hear is to wear a heavier mask or PPE and take the booster. I haven't heard anyone talk about other things, other health measures you can take to protect yourself. So such as eating healthy, getting exercise, talking about nutrition, vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc. Maybe also talk about viral cytals for both oral and nasal. I think it has worked for me. I've been taking it. I've been healthy. And I've heard a lot of other friends do the same or something similar. So I just feel that this is something that should be promoted school-wide, statewide, and even countrywide. So when I get those emails, weekly emails saying, reminder to go get your kid boosted, I am reminded, why are we talking about more health, more healthy issues? So that is my feedback from what I've been hearing. And I'd be interested to see if there's any more reports on COVID tonight here in the school and how that is subsiding. So another concern So being a member of the parent advisory group here for my daughter at Casco Bay, I've been kind of frustrated because I've been wanting to know, I've been wanting to figure out how to connect with my daughter about, especially right now. I feel like we're in troubled, educated times. And so I just want to be connected. I want to stay connected, but I also want her to learn to spread her wings and to think for herself. And I've had several teachers I've tried to email to that just nothing. I get absolutely no response from. And other teachers, wonderful. So, and it was said, I think, perfectly last week, that educators aren't well trained in how to connect with parents. And I think that is something that is troubling, considering that I want to try to be, as part of the community, to be engaged, to be engrossed, and try to give feedback and also partake. Because after all, I am a
Mr.
member.
Russo, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your 3 minutes is up.
Can I ask?
Would you like more time?
Please, ma'am.
Okay, I'll give you another minute.
Okay, thank you. So the last thing is, I got a chance to look at the budget a little bit. And I know that there is an increase that is pretty generous. But, I have to say that as a Portland resident, as someone who owns a small business, I don't have someone when I'm over budget to go ask for help. So I like to see some of this request be looked at again for review and see where there's other things that could be added, such as maybe more volunteer work to where is needed, where it's possible. Again, I'm trying to review the rest of it, but just my initial thoughts right now. And I don't know if there's going to be more public comment to be taken and when it's going to be taken on the school budget. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Russo. Is there any other public comment? I don't see any hands on Zoom, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And we are going to move to the report of the chair. Tonight, I just had a brief report. I wanted to start by talking about an experience I had this afternoon. I got to go to Reiki Community School and help move boxes and furniture into the first classrooms that have been renovated at Reiki. So I got to see for the first time. First, it was my first time in the school where I've had children for 10 years, in 2 years. And just recognizing that although I go to school often to drop off my daughter, to pick her up, I haven't actually set foot in the school for 2 years, like I know many, it's the case for many of our families. But so it was incredible to be in the building, and then to see the new classrooms and the new. And it wasn't just classrooms. There's also a bunch of specials rooms, or not specials rooms, but rooms for different specialists and special education. And I was just, we as a board got to see, of course, when Lyseth was completed, we were able to do a tour of Lyseth. Being at Reiki today and seeing my neighborhood school completely transformed. I was telling the superintendent, walking from the new part of the school and back into the school as the rest of it stands, as it's stood for many decades. It was almost hard to understand that you're still in the same building. The classrooms already have some technology. There was light. You could tell that there's air circulating, and it was just extraordinary. So I wanted to I know at our last meeting, we had a hard conversation because these projects are big and complex, and we've had hurdles throughout the process. I just wanted to bring it back today to just share with you my experience as a parent and member of the community going into my neighborhood school that my kids have gone to, or I've had kids at for 10 years, and just seeing the transformation. There's still a lot to be done, but the new part of the school is really, it's awesome. And so I wanted to thank, in particular, Steve Stilfen, our operations director, for all of his work to get us here. He's been a cheerleader for these projects from, I think, the first day that he was hired. And it's been an extraordinary amount of work to carry forward while dealing with the pandemic and all of the operations issues that the pandemic demanded. And then just the ongoing issues. While I was at Reiki, I saw in the part of the building that hasn't been renovated yet, there's a huge leak. And so just understanding the everyday issues that we're still dealing with as a school district with very old buildings, while managing all that while moving forward these 4 projects, finishing Lyseth, and moving forward the 3 remaining projects. It's just it's a tremendous amount of work. And Steve, thank you so much, and thank you also to the superintendent and to the full board. I also today wanted to talk about the Charter Commission's work. Many of us were part of a meeting last Wednesday, which went very late till after 11 p.m., where the Charter Commission took up Commissioner Houston's proposal to end the City Council review of our budget and allow us as the elected officials whose role it is to govern public education in Portland to be the ones approving our budget before it's then sent to the voters for final approval. The commission ended up delaying their deliberations and vote, and they are taking it up again at their meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. It's actually the first issue on the agenda. So I want to thank everyone. The board and superintendent have been very active in helping to make clear how the process right now is not as it should be. And this change would lead to more student-centered budgets and a governance model that is more democratic and more transparent, and ultimately more enables us as elected officials to be more accountable with a much clearer process. So I encourage, again, that meeting is tomorrow night, Wednesday, the 13th at 6 p.m. It's via Zoom, and I encourage the board and staff, members of the public to join and to make their views known. They're starting with deliberation on Commissioner Houston's proposal. There'll be a public hearing and deliberations, and then the vote. And that is it for my report tonight. So we're going to move on to the report of the superintendent. We do not have a student report tonight. So, Mr. Superintendent.
I will just mention that we don't have a student report from Casco Bay because the juniors at Casco Bay are off to junior journey. And so Miss Ellis is with her classmates there. So just hope they have a great junior journey. So I think we can start to think that we'll close the book on snow days for this year. That's 60 some degrees outside. Let's knock on wood. Assuming that holds, the last day of school for students will be June 14th and June 15th. So just hoping that is the direction that we're headed. I am thrilled to formally announce tonight that Abby Yamamoto has accepted the offer to become the executive director of Portland Adult Education. Abby will formally begin this summer when our current executive director, Anita St. Ange, retires after 5 years of distinguished service to Portland Adult Ed. I'm excited by all that Abby brings to our work at PAE and the Portland Public Schools. Working together with a committed team of adult educators at PAE, our students, and our valuable community partners, I believe that she will keep Portland adult education as the integral community institution that it is. And I also believe that Abby will help us to realize PAE's potential to continue to grow and evolve to meet the moment. Dr. Yamamoto comes to us from the Maine Association of New Americans, where she served as board chair and currently is the executive director. In this role, she has grown what was once a small volunteer-led nonprofit into a vital and growing part of the fabric of immigrant-serving organizations in the state. Prior to that, Abby ran her own consulting firm focused on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and she taught Japanese language and culture and literature at the university level. Her PhD is in Japanese and Korean language and culture from the University of California at Berkeley. Abby was born and raised in Japan. As an immigrant and woman of color, she has many shared experiences with many of our students and community members. Combined with her academic credentials and track record of growing an organization, she brings a unique perspective and valuable competencies to Portland adult education. I'm grateful to the selection committee made up of PAE staff, students, and community partners. I'm also especially grateful to Assistant Superintendent Aaron Townsend for leading this selection process. These folks invested countless hours developing and following through on a vetting process that yielded this great outcome for the Portland Public Schools. I'd be remiss if I did not thank Anita St. Ange and Liz Love for their tireless work and dedication to growing Portland adult education into the beacon of excellence that it is. I look forward to working with them as the succession takes place. And I know that Abby is with us today, so I think Abby is with us. Yes, there you are. Hi, Abby. Would you like to say a few words to the board?
Sure. Thank you so much. I don't really have anything that I prepared, so I just wanted to thank everyone for this warm welcome and just share that I'm really honored to have been selected to lead the organization, Portland Adult Ed, and also very excited to be joining this team of distinguished educators and administrators. And I really look forward to working with all of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Abby, and welcome to Portland Public Schools. In another we also learned this week that Lincoln Middle School Spanish intern teacher Mohammed Kalani won the Maine Pre-Service Teacher of the Year award. We, of course, now need to figure out how to retain him when he completes his degree. In another example of the extraordinary efforts of our staff, Portland High School music teacher Jane Sautel worked with Greg Heslin, founder of an organization called Uku Global, which has donated 400 ukuleles to the Portland Public Schools. Thanks to outreach from PPS volunteer Lee Urban, this, you may know, was featured in an article by Bill Nemitz in the Press Herald this weekend. So thank you to Mr. Heslin, especially to Jane and Mr. Urban for their efforts. As I mentioned at the last board meeting, the months of April and May are chock full of recognitions for different categories of employees. Today, I would like to recognize our administrative professionals. The official day is April 25th, but we're going to celebrate it today. These folks are at the nerve center of any institution and definitely every school. They are the ones that have their finger on the pulse of everything and are often the go-to people for everyone from students with ouchies or other problems to parents to superintendents. So thank you to our PPS administrative assistants for everything that they do to make our schools and districts function. Yesterday, Chair Figdor presented the board-approved FY23 budget to the City Council. It was a first reading, so there was no public comment, but there will be ample opportunities throughout the city's budget process for additional comments to be made. We will be having our second joint meeting between the board's finance committee and the city's finance committee on Thursday evening. That will be a virtual meeting, and I hope that you and members of the public listening today will be able to attend. I am not going to say much more about the Charter Commission and its process. I will just ask that everybody who is interested in that, please be there tomorrow, especially if you didn't get a chance to speak this past Wednesday. We're also completing and finalizing the vetting of the delay and new cost claims on the Reiki project that we discussed at our last meeting. As you may have noticed, there is a first reading of this request on this evening's agenda, although we're yet to vet the claim with the District Advisory Building Committee. This first read is there to enable us to bring it to you for approval after the DABC reviews it and advances a recommendation. So we're hoping that that happens next week and that it will be on for your approval at the May 3rd meeting. This is the same cadence that we used prior to last week's approval of the Longfellow and Presumpscot claims. So I am looking forward to finalizing that and bringing it to you for approval. Summer is just around the corner. We held a very well-attended camp fair at East End on Saturday. Over 20 camp providers were on hand to share options and recruit students for their programs. And as you know, we will have a board focus, and I'll say more about that later on the agenda. Last week, the U.S. House passed the No Child Left Outside Act. This aligns nicely with our focus on outdoor education, and we believe that we are well positioned to access the resources offered through this program down the road when they become available. The Family Engagement Advisory Committee met yesterday to discuss next steps in the Reimagining Parent Engagement efforts that they have been spearheading. On a related note, Cross Culture Community Services and Portland Empowered have teamed up to offer parent ambassador training to parents in Portland, South Portland, and Westbrook, and they currently have 10 parents engaged in this training, most of whom are from Portland. Next, I would, and I'm going to go up to the podium, talk a little bit about water testing. So let me get over there and switch to it's just easier for me to follow it on the screen than it is to follow it on my screen. So that's why I do this little dance. Yeah. Go. Okay, so as you may know, the state legislature last year passed legislation that requires every school district in Maine to test all of our facilities for lead in water. And so, you know, why is it that we are required to do that? And it's primarily for these reasons, that state requirement that I just mentioned, as well as the knowledge about the impact that it has on child development and others. So on children, lead has some very notable negative effects, particularly for young children, infants and fetuses. They're particularly vulnerable, and it leads to a number of potential challenges down the road that include things like behavior and learning problems, lower IQ and hyperactivity, slowed growth, hearing problems, and anemia. It also has effects on adults. So particularly pregnant women can pass accumulated lead to their babies, and it reduces the fetus's growth as well as potentially causes premature births. For adults, prolonged exposure to lead can lead to cardiovascular effects, increased blood pressure, decreased kidney function, and reproductive problems beyond the ones that we talked about with pregnant women. So obviously, lead in water is not something that is good, and so we're very grateful for the legislature for having passed LD 153, an act to strengthen testing for lead water in school drinking fountains, and that was passed last session and is just now being implemented. I think it's important for you and others to know that we have tested for lead in our water since 2017, and we did not do the same extensive level of testing that we're doing now. We did more sampling testing than what we're doing now. So, this is a much more rigorous and intensive testing that we're currently doing. It also is a different standard that we're testing for now than the standard that we previously used. We used to test and note levels of lead that are higher, so 15 parts per billion, and that is in the legislative, in LD 153, is instead at 4 parts per billion. So that is a more stringent requirement than what we previously had. So we are obviously finding a significant, difference in the number of fixtures that are affected. The program for the state started in October and it's running through May. We're sort of at the tail end of that, and we are just now getting all of our final results. So you may actually have noticed that it's, or you will notice that it's updated from what was in the packet that was shared this weekend. So the testing practice is that all water fixtures are tested with the exception of science lab sinks and custodial slop sinks, the ones that are used usually for cleaning mops and things along those lines. And that's primarily, and those are excluded in the legislation. It's assumed that those are not used for drinking. We've subsequently had some of our staff come to us and say that some of their science sinks they're actually using to fill water bottles and things along those lines. So in those cases, we are going to go back and retest and include those fixtures. It's collected by school custodians. So all of our custodians were trained, and they took all of the water samples, labeled them, and then they were sent to an independent lab for analysis, and then the reports have been trickling in. So as you may have seen, we've had some additional ones come in over the last couple of days. So the legislation requires that we communicate this to school staff, to parents, and one of the ways that we've done that is by posting all of this information on our website. You may recall that we had this included in our community bulletin a couple of weeks ago, and that was the official unveiling of the website, and we're continuing to update that as the new results come in. So I want to talk a little bit about the findings to date. You can see that there are still some locations that are pending here, but you can see for each of them, the number of fixtures that were tested, the number that were above that 4 parts per, actually that should be a B instead of an M, 4 parts per billion, and then a subset of that number. So in the particular first case of Deering, the 3 is inclusive of the 2. So think of it as 3 that tested elevated, 2 that tested above the 15 parts per billion. So you can see there for our secondary schools what those numbers look like. And then these are the results for our elementary schools. So we now, as of this morning, received Cliff. So we now have all of our elementary schools results are in. So you can see again there the total number of fixtures that are elevated, the total number of the elevated fixtures that are above the 15 parts per billion, threshold, which is the significant measure. So I want to talk a little bit about remediation, and then, during the discussion, Mr. Stilfen is in our Zoom, and we'll be able to answer any questions about the details around this. So what are some of the remediation aspects? And so there's some that are just routine controls. So those are things like regularly flushing our all of our sinks and water fountains and things along those lines, regular cleaning of the aerators, regular testing. So obviously we're going to be doing that annually as required by the statute. And then particularly being mindful of retesting fixtures with the elevated results, just to make sure that, once we clean the aerators, regular flushing occurs and all of that, we are able to ascertain that, those results are still the same, which will require additional controls, which we'll talk about in a minute. And just so that we made the decision to take any fixtures with elevated levels offline immediately. So that is, as we've gotten those results, our custodial staff has gone in and marked those fixtures as not for drinking. So that's in place. Then there are some temporary controls. So things like removing, what we've done, which is remove them from service until, a new fixture can be installed if it's determined that that's needed. And then, and to put the do not drink sign to provide alternative places for people to access water. And then finally, where we need to get is to the permanent controls. So that means replacing any existing fixtures and plumbing when necessary. So, and you can see at the bottom that we are contracting with specialists in environmental health to help us with the decision-making and pointing out whether it's something that gets remediated through fixtures or if it's in the plumbing and things along those lines. In some cases, if we determine that particular fixture is not, cannot be repaired, taking that offline permanently or installing a filter or doing chemical remediation to improve the water coming in. And so I think that's the update on this. And so I will, take any questions that you have. And Steve, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Could you go back to the slide with the elementary school results? Because I know that information is new, is not in board docs right now.
Yeah, so much of it is, I think this weekend we got Longfellow, Presumpscott, I want to say. What else did we get this weekend? I know we got Cliff this morning.
And Reiki.
Reiki.
Okay.
And I'll just note some of those schools are the ones where we see the highest number of fixtures that are above the standard. Are there questions from the board? Ms. Bondo.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sada. Thank you, Superintendent. So I have a couple of questions here to understand. So with the new legislature, the LD 153, so how often do we have to do those testing? How often? Because we have done it.
It's required annual testing.
Excuse me?
Annual, every year. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So since 2017 and now it's like more close to 5 years. So did we hear any health issues related to that from families or from staff?
Steve, do you want to talk about what we've been doing since 2017?
Since 2017? Yes. Since 2017, we've tested annually as per the 15 parts per billion rate. And the instruction from state on testing was non-specific to numbers of fixtures. It was outlined as the inlet source, first floor, second floor, furthest from the inlet source, that drinking water fixtures were to be tested. So a school with 3 floors and more drinking water fixtures, they were tested over those years, every year, annually. And in putting this in context a little bit, during the pandemic, our fixtures were shut off. I've talked to the Portland Water District. They're assuring me, and we see this where we see testing on the inlet source into our schools below 1 part per billion. So we're receiving a very good quality water from the Portland Water District. Things stop at the entry, and then we begin to test to work back to the entry to see where lead may be entering our water source. So with the annual testing from 17 to the 15 parts per billion, we have remediated and replaced 12 fixtures over that period of time. They were hallway corridor, Halsey Taylor type drinking fountains, where we replaced with LK unit bottle fillers. So now think in context of the pandemic. All these fixtures were shut off. All the drinking fixtures were shut off during the pandemic. We got instruction to test to 4 parts per billion. We trained our custodial staff. We deployed through the schools, and we flowed the water. Now, in 2018, for example, when Rose School was built, I have commissioning tests that are very, very low on lead, very low. And now we look at a elevated number above 4, but approaching 15. It's not an exact science. I would say that you can find error in testing. So our first step now will be to retest all elevated. And the trend from what I've reviewed in our past surveys of testing for lead, 65 to 70% of the time, when a fresh draw is taken as recommended by the EPA on a fixture that has tested elevated once, it's a 60 to 70% trend in our water testing that it comes back below the standard. So our approach with the history and trend that we know in these tests that are coming in is to reflush all of these fixtures to get a secondary backup to the test, because we know, and we're testing the primary source coming into the building is below 1. So what that tells us is that lead is leaching in the system somewhere. Now, lead's in the air, it's in the environment, and it certainly can be in fixtures. So we will eliminate any second test fixture with inspection and new fixture. And if it's able to be replumbed into our walls and into our systems, and we'll do that. So we'll get to a position where we'll either be replacing these fixtures on second tests that can't test to the standard. And so it's a point of source and a point of use approach we're taking. We did over those years find a fixture in the PATH buildings that on second test was above 15 parts per million. And we installed a point of use filter system in that sink. So it brought the levels on the following test to the appropriate levels. Now, all of the LK bottle fillers that we've installed have their own internal lead filtration system with a red LED on the machine that indicates when the filter is plugging up with material.
Okay. Right.
So we can tell whether we need to change the filter. So they're monitored, and the LED tells us that.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
I see the little more sense right there, but come on with a better sense of when we doing the testing, I mean, that period where we doing the testing, are we shutting down the sink or the fountain and using the bottle until we get a result, or we testing and the kids are still using those things about the until? Because when I look at the remediation, we start acting after the result came.
That's correct. We did not shut off the water to our schools while we were waiting for the test results to come in.
So are we going to get more approach, like on the testing time, those things should be shut down till we get a result, and using the bottle can be one of those strategies for the next time, because
But that would mean that we would not have running water in our schools.
I cannot hear you.
That would mean that we do not have running water in our schools.
Okay.
So that is not an option. I think it's important to sort of contextualize this,
Okay.
that this is our baseline. We are going to remediate this baseline. We expect to see very few instances going forward because we will remediate. Again, what those remediation steps are: first to retest and see if if the second test comes back better than the first test. Steve said 65% of the time that's what happens. And then for the remainder, we will remediate those places. He described how he remediated the previous ones that we had found at 15 parts per billion. And, we will continue to do that. And, like our expectation is that you won't see those results next year, but it would not be an option to just say, this has been months waiting for these results to come back. So it would not be feasible for us to not have water in the schools during that period of time.
All right. Thank you.
I can add something to that. I might clarify a little bit. In our elementary schools, we have sinks with a thumb spigot to drink from, and we have a gooseneck to the sink.
Okay.
Where you could fill a coffee pot up. There's a shut-off valve to the drinking spigot. Those are shut off and have been for the whole term of the pandemic. But like the superintendent said, running water to the sink, we did not shut off.
Okay. Right.
And we've needed and will continue to need kids to wash their hands and, all of those things, so we can't shut off water.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo. Board Member Burke.
Thank you, Chair. One, I'd just like to correct, I think there may have been a misunderstanding. I heard Ms. Bondo ask about the drinking water, not the total water to a building. So I think there was a misconnect there. For the schools that are testing now higher than 15 parts per million, right? Or is it supposed to be billion? ppm?
It's supposed to be billion, yes.
It's supposed to be billion?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it the first time that these results have appeared since we've been testing for that limit?
I'm going to let Steve answer that, but I would say the answer to that is yes. That, if we had tested that particular faucet, prior, it would not, and it came back at 15 parts per billion. Those were the ones that we were correcting. I think that, Steve mentioned that we've expanded the testing as a result of this new law, that we weren't, checking those, a bunch of these are like kitchen sinks. We weren't checking kitchen sinks before. So it was, it was the drinking fountains. What else was required prior, Steve? Drinking fountains.
It was drinking fountains. And in the 15 part per billion standard throughout the state in our schools, or not specific to account for every fixture to be tested, even if it was a drinking fixture. They described it as entry source, first floor furthest away, second floor furthest away. If you have a source that's coming in that, in our situation from Sebago Lake through Portland Public Water, the source is tested out consistently below 1 part per billion for lead.
Thanks for that clarification. So
elevated lead.
Anywhere in those multiple checkpoints within that testing schema, was there any time that our schools have tested above 15 parts per billion previous to this year?
Yeah, and
Yes.
Steve talked about the places where he's remediated those situations in the past where we've.
And are they
found them.
redundant to what I'm seeing on the screen now?
They shouldn't be. Steve, that's a good question, but there's no part that we had previously remediated that is now still 15 parts per million. 15
That's right.
parts per billion.
Well, like, for example, if you look, and I don't have it to show you, our newest school, Rowe, commissioning lead levels were less than 1 in 2018-19. They tested now elevated be above 4. The tests need to be redone. So redundancy in fixtures from source in further circulation point encompasses all fixtures within that water system and that pipe. So the theory on testing for lead prior to the 4 parts per billion being the standard now was the circulation of lead through the building, whether you're drinking it or cooking with it. So that's the approach the state took with schools prior to this reduction in lead position to 4 parts per million. It's still the same scientific approach. And in 1986, lead was banned in construction, right? So we shouldn't be dealing with fixtures at Rowe that have any lead solder. So either the tests weren't flowed enough, the system was shut down for a long period of time in pandemic, it needs to be retested to confirm either it is seeing real lead and it's not from the source from Sebago Lake, has to be from within the building where I have commissioning that showed less than 1.
Right.
So testing
Mr. Stofan, I appreciate
is part
Steve,
of the
Steve,
track.
I think Mr. Burke says he has another question.
Enough?
Yeah, no, I
Okay.
appreciate you diving into that, and I appreciate you highlighting Rowe in particular, because I certainly have questions about that. So I look forward to your diagnostics on why we're seeing that rise in levels there based against the commission studies that you have and what we're seeing now. I guess, Superintendent, if I could ask for in a future time that you bring one of these charts that shows me where we've seen 15 parts per billion previously, and if they are redundant to what we're seeing here, and if not, how they've gone down over time. That's perhaps not the right time to try to answer it tonight.
We would be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Burke. Ms. Russell-Better.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Superintendent, for bringing this to us tonight. I just had a couple questions. I think hopefully Steve could answer, or maybe in the future give us some more information. It was helpful, Steve, to hear about the piece about inspection and flushing as far as remediation. But I guess I'm curious, in a little bit of the research that I've done, I'm interested in the model of filter first. And it sounds like since we already have a number of filling stations, and it sounds like potentially sink filters in our buildings, I'm just curious what your thinking is about addressing the issue in that manner, as opposed to the other remediation measures. And then my question was just about whether you could get us some information about that, about numbers of filling stations and filters that we already have in the buildings.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have thoughts about that, Steve? Just
I do.
as far as that approach.
We do, and I think that's the predominant approach. That filtration will be the main mitigation source for our elevated fixtures and outlets. Without getting into the details of chemistry, there are more than just lead carriers or total dissolved solids in any water. Our greatest resource is the water we're being supplied from the Portland Water District. And they're consistently testing, and the pH is in the balance. So cartridges, for example, I just will give you this up. If pH remains the same and sediment in the water outside of lead is low, then the holes won't plug up in the filter and you continue to flow through. we don't have the issues of different pHs as other school districts do, where they end up changing their filters every week and they build that into their budget. I don't foresee that for us, and that would be a determination to say, do we do fixtures? If we were in a situation where we were looking at expense to replace cartridges on a weekly basis in numbers, then we would look at a front end system like we have installed in Deering for the kitchen section of Deering, a separate source filter to take care of sections of the building. So yes, cartridges in our situation I believe will prove out to be the point of use correction for our school district in the areas where we're seeing elevated lead.
And Steve, would like the LK unit you were talking about, would that be what you would use a cartridge
Yes.
in that kind of a unit? Okay. So I think, go ahead.
The LKs have one internally built in. And if we have a sink, as Mr. Burke was talking about, I don't think it was a redundant retest, but in a sink that we had 2 tests on, whether it's in this survey or not, we have installed a different cartridge underneath the sink in the cabinet that takes care of the lead. So LK comes with one already built in, and we are installing the other point of use filters in those type of situations.
Okay, so I think the piece that would be helpful for me, if this is reasonable to ask for, to get this information, would be, it sounds like the best practice, if this is what you're also understanding, Steve, is that for per every 100 students having a filling station. So I would just like to know kind of where are we at for that in the district? And am I correct that in our newer buildings, like that are getting constructed, that we probably will have, right? Or it's probably different throughout our buildings, I'm guessing, like what the filling station availability is, but I would just like to get a sense of where we're at.
We can do that.
With that. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Russell-Better. Ms. Dio.
I was just wondering if you had a rate of, like, was there a control? And do you have any idea of the rate of the false positive? How accurate are these numbers?
I think I heard Steve say that with retesting 65%, but that's on average. I don't know that, what it will be for us, but is that correct, Steve? 65%?
It is.
Okay.
And I can't emphasize enough that we were in the pandemic and there was no flow in any of our schools predominantly for water for extended period of time. And it's critical to flow the fixture long enough. And if the aerator was plugged or accumulated with source lead and you take the test, you don't flow it long enough, you're going to get a false reading of lead. So we reconfirm with testing, and we've engaged ESHA moving forward to do all of our testing. All of our staff are still trained to test, and as we move forward with our programmatic remediations here, we'll have the same level of attentiveness from all staff that must be involved with watching out for lead in our water, from checking filters to doing spot testing, and also with having verification testing from engineers.
Okay, thanks. And I know that this is.
Ms. Dio, can you speak into the microphone? It's hard to hear you.
I know that this is for most, lead is most important for children, but I was just curious if if the law or if testing was done in the, Portland adult education.
Steve, it was done. We're just waiting for results. Is that correct?
Pardon me, Javier?
Is that correct that we're waiting for results on Portland adult ed?
No, that's not correct. We did not test in the first round, adult ed, but we are scheduling testing right now, as well as at the central office and as well as Waldron Way, the food service building.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dio. Mr. Youssef.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Superintendent. I think I just want to get clarification about, I think Steve mentioned testing need to be redone. When is that, the testing to be redone, please?
We're scheduling as we speak, sir. With the ESHA, there's a chain of custody that needs to be completed. The state has required us to use A&L laboratories in the first and second round of testing. As we move forward in the program, we will be allowed to choose different labs. It's important to note, Mark and I was talking about this afternoon, lab results are 3, 4, 5 weeks backed up throughout the whole state, no matter if it's A&L or not. So to answer your question, we are going to get the chain of custody of the bottle. ESHA will schedule the remaining tests of the 3 places that were omitted in the first round. And also every fixture, as you see here, that's been identified above 4 parts per million will be second tested. We'll get the results. We'll move to remediation. Cartridge, it may come back and test fine. I fully expect that the Rose School will come back a totally different look. So let's verify what we got in the first round, and then we'll remediate anything above 4.
Thank you, Steve. You cover my second question, which was the bending time that we wait the result. In terms of communicating with staff, parents, and is it through a magazine, or how do we inform families and the result?
Yeah, so we are required to communicate directly with parents. At this point, we've only started with posting the results and communicating about. You can find the results. It's right on the front of our webpage. It was in our community newsletter 2 weeks ago. And now when we get all of the results in, we are prepared to go directly to parents at each building and just direct them to where they can find that information. So they'll get a direct connection from us on those results.
All right. Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Youssef. Okay, seeing no other questions from the board, I have a number of questions. I'm first wondering, of the tests that are above 15 parts per billion, how elevated are they? Meaning, kind of what's the range of exposure?
I think it runs the gamut from, 16 to, I don't remember what the highest one was, but it was something, Steve, do you remember, like 78 or something like that? It was the coffee maker at the cappuccino machine at Deering High School.
I think, Javier, that it was in 300 range for the cappuccino machine at Deering. Now, understand that in a 1/8-inch copper tube to a cappuccino machine, reading 300 parts per billion would be plugged solid. So how this test was done, what's internal to that, we need to retest. Those type of parts.
So besides the.
So just to get to my initial question, of the tests that were above 15 parts per billion, what was, how high? I hear that one example, but what was typical? And that gets me to my next question, which is, I see on slide 9 that we say that we made the decision to take fixtures with elevated levels offline immediately, but then that I don't understand that within the overall presentation. So which fixtures, have we taken some offline already? And if so, which ones? For schools like Longfellow, where it's the majority of fixtures, what have we done there? Also at Reiki. So perhaps I'm not understanding the presentation, but it doesn't. Yeah, I'm
just making it clear that that is not for drinking. So there's signs posted, and they were posted immediately when we got the results, or, almost immediately when we got the results, so that, going forward, they wouldn't be used for drinking anymore.
So at Longfellow right now, there are 2 faucets that are available for drinking water. And Is that correct? And how are we ensuring that kids have drinking water? I did see on the slide that we would be in a
Provide bottled water. and
position to
yes.
provide bottled water.
Not only just bottled water, but we're providing cooled bottled waters dispensers, the Poland Spring jugs.
So all fixtures above 4 parts per billion have been taken offline for drinking water.
That is my understanding.
Yes. Yes, and in Longfellow, Chair, as I described the sink, there's a thumb bubbler spigot. It's shut off. That's where people were to drink the water. The water was left on for running water in the faucet sink. And that's what was tested, was the bubbler, the thumb fixture spigot you would drink from, not underneath the faucet or fill a bucket up or a coffee cup or something. So the testing of the fixture is the same water, whether it's going through the spigot or through the faucet. So we shut off the drinking faucet at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, I heard that. And then just back to my initial question, and I cut you off by asking the next question. So just, can you tell me more about the results above 15 parts per billion and the range of what we saw in those schools where we did see those results elevated, more elevated than the old standard?
I don't understand your question, Chair.
So I'm wondering, I guess I'm looking for more information on how, you use the example of the cappuccino machine at Deering having 300 parts per billion. I'm wondering what else did we see among the results where we got results that were above 15 parts per billion. The superintendent indicated some were very close to the standard, to the old standard.
I'm looking at the Deering report right now, and that was the most elevated. It was 81.6 was the cappuccino machine. The other one that was elevated was the kitchen, the coffee maker in the kitchen, and that was at 29.6. There was also in the kitchen, next to the kitchen office, a sink that was 5 parts per billion. So of the 3, there was 2 that were, above the 15, one 29.6, the other one 81.6. Would you want to go through all of the?
No, I was just trying to get more of a sense of how, of the results, how elevated were they? I can move on. So the testing that we've done since 2017, I appreciate that we're doing that annual testing and have that baseline. And it's important in understanding these results. I hear Steve saying that. Was it voluntary previously and we were taking the step of doing this testing, or there was just a different state standard that was the 15 parts per billion standard? I'm just wondering what was the regulatory structure, if there was one before.
Steve?
The structure before was the request to annually test outlets from the source to, as I said, it was
just a request by the state.
Annual
but not
testing.
Not a requirement.
Not a requirement.
And so the new law that was passed both made it a requirement and required all fixtures be tested and lowered the standard to 4 parts per billion.
That's correct in all drinking water fixtures, with the exclusion of which the LD 153 speaks to science labs, shower heads, slop sinks, that type of fixture or outlet.
Okay. Thank you. These results are are very concerning. Lead is, at very low levels of exposure, does tremendous damage. So I know that we're working expeditiously to retest and to move forward with those results, and anything we can do to expedite the process, I think, is warranted. I understand Steve, explaining why we think that upon retest that many of the fixtures that are elevated will meet the standard. However, other than Roe, there is some intuitive sense in the results, in that our oldest buildings are coming back with, like Longfellow and Reiki, coming back with a very high number of fixtures above the standards, or above the standard. So thank you for this work. I can't underscore how important it is to get to the bottom of this and to take all of the steps necessary to ensure that our students and staff are not exposed to lead in their drinking water. So I think with that, we can move on.
Okay. So next, I'd like to begin our regular update on how we're working to keep our schools safe and our staff and students healthy. As we've been doing for the past year and a half now, we provide a comprehensive update on our school reopening plans here at the board meetings. As you know, there has been a slight uptick in cases. Our pools remain below 3% positive, and county data that's being monitored by Dr. Gita continues to not produce cause for alarm. On Friday, the DOE notified superintendents that heeding the advice of the Maine CDC, they are leaning towards ending the state's pooled testing program. And this appears to be driven by the reduced effectiveness of the current tests. I'm meeting with Mr. Townsend with our medical team to determine our recommendations should the state end the program before the end of the year. In the meantime, leveraging our capacity as we discontinued required high school athletic pool testing, as we've discussed before, we've been able to expand pool testing to any high school student who wishes to enroll in the program. I think it's important to, always take this opportunity to stress the importance of continuing to monitor ourselves for symptoms of COVID, because symptomatic individuals will possibly be unmasked. It is all the more critical that anyone who is symptomatic stay home whenever they identify those symptoms. If you are symptomatic, please inform your school's nurse if you suspect that you may have come down with COVID, and they will help you to understand the timing and options for testing and quarantine. Next, I would like to review our key data points. As you know, we don't have a specific threshold at which point we would return to masking, but we will be monitoring our own in-school cases along with any county and city level indicators to make those decisions. At this time, all of our indicators are largely stable as I noted earlier. So on to the customary slides. I'll begin with updating you on student and staff attendance. So on the student attendance side, next slide. You can see that our attendance has stayed generally consistent. So, from the time that we got past the January, February surge to present, we have held our attendance. We saw a very sharp decrease across all three levels last Friday, but that reset to the normal levels on Monday and Tuesday. We don't currently have an explanation for what happened last Friday. Staff attendance on the next slide has also leveled off, and with the peaks that you see generally associated with Fridays Friday attendance. We've been reporting data by grades. And so you can see that there still isn't much to report here as the overall numbers continue to be low, and generally the presence is spread out over the grades pretty consistently. And finally, here's a comparison to the county. Again, there's not much to report here. It's pretty much a flat line on both fronts. We had 20 cases last week and a total of 6 positive pools. Again, this week, there were no classes where there were positives for 2 consecutive weeks, a minimum of 5 positive cases in the class or in that pool over that period, and a second week where the number of positive cases trended higher. So you can see that we've established a fairly consistent baseline around this, that those measures are no longer coming back with anything for us to be alarmed. So that's really all that we have in terms of data. As we've said throughout, it takes all of us working together to keep schools safe for students and staff, listening to our medical advisors and public health officials as we are heading into spring, and we'll be on spring break beginning on Friday. I'd like to urge staff, students, and families to please enjoy the time away from school, but take the necessary precautions to monitor whether you have COVID before returning to school on the 26th. And that concludes my report.
Thank you so much, Mr. Superintendent. Are there questions from the board on this last proposal, this last presentation? Ms. Russell-Better.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Superintendent. I just was wondering, I know you've mentioned that it might be coming down the pike that the state will be stopping the pool testing. So do you have are they giving any time frame about that? Or are you just kind of waiting to hear at this point?
They've said that it's between, the end of April and middle of May when they would expect to discontinue the testing.
Okay. So I'm just wondering if that was to happen, if there are any other, it just seems like trying to do any kind of testing without that would be really difficult. So I'm just wondering if the medical team has had thoughts about any other mitigation strategies, or I guess that's a time to be outside, where I'm just kind of wondering what thoughts might be if that were to happen the next month.
Yeah, I think that's what we're meeting to discuss, whether we wanted to continue the program through the end of the year at our own expense. If we felt that was, I do think that it's important to stay true to what we've done throughout, which is to listen to the public health experts. And this recommendation is coming from public health experts. I think that we need to look at what are the options that would serve as an alternative. So,
okay. I wasn't even thinking, since it's been through the state, that seems like that would be quite an undertaking to pursue a totally different, business or program to do the testing.
Yeah. I again, don't have the specifics, if that is even worth attempting to do, but if so, we will, we're meeting to discuss that.
You said you will be meeting to discuss that. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And we've started that conversation. It's just trying to understand exactly what it is that doesn't, that makes it where we no longer think that the pool testing is valuable, because if it isn't valuable, then we shouldn't really engage in the expense and the, and the work that it will take to convert, to get a contract and do all of those things. So, that's, I think, first and foremost what our team needs to understand.
Okay. And I just think it's unfortunate because it's out of our control if the state stops, but it just seems like, another month to get through school or something. It just seems unfortunate that we couldn't continue to have that, that level of mitigation, but I appreciate that that's a tricky place to be in to try to figure that out. So, so thank you for continuing to problem solve it and keeping us up to date. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Russell-Better. Ms. Dew?
You had mentioned the reduced effectiveness of the tests. Can you explain what you meant by that?
No, unfortunately, I can't. That is what we've asked our medical team to help us to understand, because I don't I don't know.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Tew. Yes, go ahead, Ms. Bondo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Superintendent. So just two small questions to understand. Are we still requiring masks inside our bus? So when the student or
We are
optional?
not. No,
Is optional or no?
it is optional.
Okay.
Yes.
And we have some partner site with our pre-K. Are we doing the pool testing in our partner site also, or just?
I don't recall, did we ever get to pool test at the partner sites, or we never got there?
We not at the partner sites, except for with the exception here of the one at Paths. So we are doing the testing here at Paths because we have the on-site nursing capacity, but we just don't have the nursing capacity to do the testing and the follow-up testing that would be required in the partner pre-K sites. So all of the pre-Ks located in PPS buildings are part of pooled testing, including Paths.
Okay, but not on the partner side.
Correct.
Is there any reason?
Yes, because we have at all of our other sites, we have on-site full-time nurses that are able to administer the program, whereas at the partner sites, we do not have that resource and capacity.
But those classes are for us. I mean, those classes are PPS classes.
That's true. Yes.
So we never have any kind of approach or talk about how can we have those protests, because those are students.
That is true. I mean, as we've detailed and we've been able to make some adjustments and some, limited availability at the high school level. It has been a real challenge all spring to add to our health team's capacity to be able to extend. We just don't have the people to be able to get there to be able to implement the program. And that's, been also true for us at the high school level. So, just until recently, we've been able to try and add capacity where it's possible, but, there are limitations to that.
Okay. Do we know if any of those partner sites are doing also on their own?
I'm not aware. I do not believe so. I mean, the pool testing, again,
if they were doing it on their own, our kids would be a part of it.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I want to understand. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo. Are there any other questions from the board? I have a couple questions. One, I know initially when we made masks optional that we still saw a substantial portion of our students and staff wearing masks. And I'm wondering how that has changed just from what you're observing.
I would still say that it's running about a third wearing masks.
Both
regularly.
students and staff, or?
I see more students than staff, so I would say, I don't know about the staff. If it's probably at a higher level, I'm just trying to think of, visualizing it right now. It's just off the top of my head. So
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I would say, it's hard to say because it's also anecdotal and
Absolutely.
Particularly not seeing staff convened in one place, for, all the time. But I feel like the patterns haven't, in my experience, I don't think the patterns have changed that much from when we shifted to mask optional. So it's not, I don't believe we've seen, an ongoing decrease in the lack of mask wearing. I think it has stayed, relatively stable. And in the early days, we had noticed kind of high school students actually masking more frequently than elementary students, which had been not what I'd anticipated personally. But since that time, it feels like relatively consistent.
So we still have a substantial number of students and staff masking.
Yep.
And, it's with the small uptick in positive cases, it is very good to see that we're not seeing two or more cases in classrooms. It's almost surprising.
Well, we've actually had a handful of places where we did have 2 cases in a pool or in a classroom, but not
more than 2.
not growing from week to week and up to 5 in the second week. So.
Yeah, there was one a couple weeks ago. There was a classroom at an elementary school that we were monitoring pretty intensively and did some additional beyond the follow-up Binax testing because there had been 3 cases reported connected to the classroom. We did successive rounds of actual follow-up Binax testing with that class. and those continued to come back negative. We were back on cycle with the pooled testing, all came back negative. So, and we knew of some known associations outside of school as well for some of those students. So yes,
Yeah,
also very
just
good.
noting that these results are quite reassuring.
Sure.
I appreciate all the continued work to move forward, to maintain the precautions we have and to continue with testing for as long as we can. I'm interested to hear what the medical team says with regard to pool testing, if the state does end the program. And what the cost might be and the feasibility might be if we wanted to try and go it ourselves through the end of the school year. I do think it provides, even if it's not providing a level of precaution, if it's not, if the rates are so low that it's not having a public health impact because we're seeing so few positive tests. I do think that to the extent that we see another variant take hold, it gives us information to get ahead of that. So, I hear the superintendent in terms of, being consistent and following the recommendations of our public health officials. I also think it gives us a level of information that's just incredibly valuable in terms of what's actually happening.
I mean, if we determine, our public health officials believe that is the case, then I think in that case we should continue it. But, I think you all know that I was, slow to move on the masks because I'm a belt and suspenders kind of a guy. But, I do think that, we've gotten where we've gotten by trusting the medical experts, and I think we should continue to do that.
I'd just add briefly, I think, and this is the question the superintendent said, we are, I'm not sure exactly what that meant, but
what do you mean you don't know? Belt and suspenders that you just like
both? Yes. Okay. All right. Anyway,
Never seen you wear suspenders, Mr. Superintendent.
Nobody wears suspenders anymore.
That is not true.
Belt and suspenders together is like a really bad idea, but that's my point.
Gotcha. That just the validity of the tests are coming into question. And that's part of what we've asked the medical team to help us understand more deeply, is that lower rates of positives coming back on the PCR tests. Yes. And the time span of the contagiousness of the new variants. And so,
I see. Okay.
So it's issues like that we're trying to understand deeper to understand the value it continues to provide vis-a-vis the effort, right? And we have some pretty solid systems in place, but still, certainly if cost and time and energy are limited resources at this point. So
absolutely. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful to further understand the context. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So, Mr. Superintendent, does that conclude?
I think Mr. Youssef.
Mr. Youssef, I'm so sorry. I did not look at my screen. Please go ahead, Mr. Youssef.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Superintendent. I just have a quick question about are we still require staff to be vaccinated?
We do not require staff to be vaccinated. We incentivize staff to be vaccinated. That's the way it's been throughout. We still have well over 90% of our staff are vaccinated. We do at this point still require staff who are not vaccinated to test weekly. So that continues at this time.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Youssef. All right, Mr. Superintendent, does that conclude your remarks?
It does.
Okay, thank you. So we are moving to the report of the Secretary. Consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of April 5th, 2022. Is there a motion? Ms. Bondo, seconded by Ms. Russell-Better. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, I'm going to move to public comment. Is there any public comment on our meeting minutes? So I see a a hand up, and I just want to confirm from Julio and Liz that your comment is on our meeting minutes. And if so, I'm going to unmute you, and you have 3 minutes to address the board regarding our meeting minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Figdor. This is Elizabeth Capone-Newton. I actually raised my hand in the earlier portion. Perhaps I missed the part where people could have public comment about the superintendent's report.
Okay. Yeah, there isn't the opportunity for public comment is at the beginning of our meeting, and we don't take public comment or when we get to agenda items. And if we have a second read on those agenda items meeting, we're going to deliberate and vote on those issues, and we'll also have public comment on each agenda item, but we don't take public comment on the superintendent's report. So Liz, the next opportunity will be at our next board meeting when we start at 6 p.m. We just open the meeting, and then after we just do the basics of taking attendance and that kind of thing, then we go right into public comment.
And I appreciate that. And I did read the policy. It just seemed a little bit vague to me. I understand that if your meeting ends before 10 p.m., you would take public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Is that correct?
That's correct. And that is what we do right at the start of our meeting. And we used to do that at the end of the meeting, and sometimes our meetings go until late into the night. And so we moved it to be our first substantive agenda item to give the community more consistency with and clarity in terms of when and how they can participate in our meetings. So Liz, thank you so much. And I look forward to you participating in our future meetings. And with that, I'm going to close public comment on our meeting minutes and move to board discussion. Is there any board discussion on our meeting minutes from our April 5th meeting? Yes, Ms. Russell-Better.
Thanks, Chair. Is it okay to just make a comment or an amendment to? I'm just noticing my name misspelled in a few different spots. So
I apologize for that. We will correct that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Russell-Better. Are there any other comments? Any other discussion? If not, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you approve the meeting minutes of April 5th, 2022. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Russell-Better?
Yes.
Ms. Biliu?
Yes.
Mr. Youssef?
Yes.
Ms. Diu?
Yes.
I'm sorry, is Mr. Alzamili? And Chair Figdor?
Yes. So the meeting minutes from our April 5th meeting are unanimously approved, with our student who is present tonight voting with the majority. Now we are on to consent items. Mr. Superintendent, will you please speak to this agenda item?
Yes, under Board Policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district as required by that policy. All of the donations are listed in the board agenda under this item. In our practices for each donor to receive a written contribution acknowledgement expressing our heartfelt gratitude as well as for their tax purposes. I would like to thank the generous contributors to the Portland Public Schools who have made donations of durable goods, goods of substantial value and historical or commemorative significance, including this week. Portland High School received 4 $50 gift cards to Walmart for the food pantry from April and Dennis Noonan. Portland Public Schools, as you heard earlier, has received 440 ukuleles and accessories for school musical programs from Greg Heslin and Uku Global. And Lincoln Middle School Band has received a donation of instruments from David Berthiaume. So I would like to thank all of our contributors for their generosity and support. And next, I would like to turn it over to Andy Weissman Summers, Executive Director of the Foundation for Portland Public Schools, who is going to do the quarterly report on donations to the foundation. Andy?
Thank you, Superintendent. Just sharing my screen. All right. Well, thank you for having me. For those who aren't aware, the Foundation for Portland Public Schools is a nonprofit organization that is institutionally aligned with the district. And per our MOU with the district, I provide a report to this board quarterly throughout the year. So first in the report now is just a reminder that for the first time since 2019, pre-pandemic, we are having our annual event. And we hope that all of you listening in here can join us. It is on May 11th from 5:30 to 7:30. It is a fundraiser, but it's also a community building event. So while there are tickets for sale, there are also tickets available for those who couldn't afford to make a donation, and we welcome everyone to join us. The link for tickets is in the slides. It's on our website. And we have, for the first time ever, I believe, a video describing the impact of the work of the foundation that we're going to premiere at that event. All of the fundraising for that event is a fundraiser for our Equity and Innovation Teacher Grants program. I know that the board has heard a bit about this, but recently on March 23rd, the Foundation for Portland Public Schools, in partnership with the Family Parent, and it says Advisory Council, yes, that's right? Family Parent Advisory Council in Portland Empowered co-hosted an event around the question, how can we reimagine the work of our current parent groups? So that's PTOs and other parent groups, so that it's more inclusive of families in the district. It was a pretty amazing event. I don't have an official count, but I would estimate there were about 80 people there who had a ton of ideas about how we can make that work happen. So I wanted to share with this group that the planning of that, we're going to have a follow-up event that will be publicized shortly on May 24th that my colleagues at Portland Empowered and the parents, lead organizers and parent engagement partners and those who have been through the parent ambassador program of that program will be sharing and kind of workshopping how to work with the Portland Empowered Parent Manifesto and their toolkit of ways to reduce barriers and make meetings and events at schools more inclusive of the whole community, which is very exciting. And I did also want to share with this group that one of the other things that's come out of those meetings is a conversation around the idea that PTOs spend a lot of time fundraising and that very practice and opportunity makes attendance, that's a barrier to attendance for people who don't typically attend. And so we're starting to explore ways that the foundation might be able to work with schools to potentially centralize some of that fundraising and then distribute it back out so that PTOs can focus more on issues engaging those parents, those students, community building and things like that. We are early in that process, so don't look for a sudden announcement this spring, but I'm excited about learning more and trying to figure out what that might look like. So that's coming from this work as well. I did want to share that one of the funds we manage is the Pps Food Fund. That is a fund we manage with Food Fuels Learning, which is a group that's part of the Cumberland County Food Security Council. And within April, we gave out 9 grants totaling $17,750 that all address food insecurity for Portland students and families. Also, we have our summer innovation grants back. The last year that the foundation ran this program was in 2018, but we have realized that in part because of changes in professional development schedules this year due to complications around COVID, that there have been a lot of staff who have kind of planning and work to do that they weren't able to do this year because of all of the shifts in priorities, safety issues and so on. So we have put aside, the board of the foundation has put aside $20,000, and we are going to be providing stipends for staff to do planning work over the summer. Grants are open now. I did also want to share that I recently joined the board of directors of the National Association of Education Foundations. So that is a group with a mission to strengthen education foundations across the country with a vision that all students have robust educational opportunities. And so I attended their annual board strategic planning retreat in Baltimore a few weeks ago. And I'm just really excited to be bringing best practices from other public education foundations around the country here to Portland. And then finally, what I do at each quarterly report, which is I share what we call major donations of $1,000 or over. So these are individuals who have donated at that level since my last quarterly report, which was in early January, but the data ran through December 29th. I'm not going to read all of their names, but they are there for the record. And then I also like to share that although we call out major donors, we received 96 smaller donations in that time period, which is critical as well. And we want to thank our $10 donors and our $25 donors and so on, whose names are listed in our annual report. But those donations totaled $19,212. And what we've never done before is a special shout out to our recurring donors who give monthly or biweekly. So there they are. Those are really loyal and special donors to us. These are the business donations from this spring of over $1,000. I'm not going to read them all. These are business sponsors of the event that I led with, the Spring for Teachers event. So all of these local organizations have donated for that event. So all of this money goes directly to teacher grants. And then finally, this is the list of grants that we have received on behalf of the Portland Public Schools since January 1st. And so in summary, the foundation is having a strong year and a greater impact on Portland students than ever before. We've raised $1.1 million 3 quarters into this fiscal year so far, and all of that is money for Portland students. Finally, I wanted to update you on the fundraising priorities that I shared the last time we met. The mobile makerspace, which is very exciting. We have a trailer. It has been purchased, which is really great. Plans to customize it for the needs of the makerspace activities are underway. Brooke Teller is leading this work. She started to, purchase 3D printers and laser cutters and all kinds of amazing things. And that will pilot with STEM Summer Camp. We found out today that we received funding from the Les Paul Foundation, so it didn't make it into these slides, but that's another exciting support of this work. Also, the Wabanaki Film Project that I know you're all aware of, filming has started, which you may not have known. So during February break, Fiona Hopper and her team, Bridget Neptune and others, were up at Passamaquoddy Maple up near Jackman. And we now have raised close to $200,000 for this work, meaning the film is definitely going to be funded. There's a small gap, but we're very close. And I believe that's it. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Andy. And it's great for you to have joined us here in person. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Ms. Russell-Better, did you have your hand up? No.
You're gonna cheer.
Are there questions from the board? Ms. Bondo, and then Mr. Youssef.
Thank you, Andy, and congratulations for the market space. So
Thanks.
I look for it. So yeah, I have a question. If I do remember, I think last year when you present, I saw some funds to support some families. I mean, the Portland Public School families, community needs. Are we still doing it?
Yeah, that's the Families in Crisis program, and it is just ongoing and still running. I'm happy to report it's slightly smaller than last year when we were in full pandemic mode. I don't have the exact numbers, but I believe last year we distributed about $75,000 to support families. So that's one-time payments of rent, utilities, transportation costs, medical costs, or other non-food supplies. This year, I think to date, we're at about $48,000 of disbursements. And it's not on here with news. There hasn't been a big grant for that, but we still have funds for it, and the program is ongoing.
Okay.
And a huge shout out to social workers and the multilingual staff, who really run that program.
Okay, great. So I saw on the food and security here, the grants, then I just want to have example, what those kind of application, I mean, the schools or maybe community organization applying for one specific project. So I'm just curious to know about the schools.
Yeah.
So are they doing like a cultivating or what kind of kind of, just a few examples?
I won't give all of the examples, but I can give a few of them. So that grant program can go to individuals or schools or organizations. So there were a couple of individual school staff members who requested a small amount of funding. I know there was a teacher or social worker at Deering High School who requested, $500 to have snacks available, in her room. So that's a very small example. One of the grants went to the new culturally appropriate food pantry out of Multilingual.
Okay.
One of the grants went to a community partner to Presente Maine for their food brigade work. That unified Asian communities got a small grant for culturally appropriate food baskets when they do home visits.
Okay. So my sub question is that some of those programs like the multilingual is, how can we sustain them? Because it's a need to the community to try to build more ethnic food to try to, fight against the food insecure. So they have to apply every year as like other grants, or?
Yeah. The nice thing is that there's a really strong network that's led by the Cumberland County Food Security Council. They have monthly meetings on a range of topics. So they have a charitable foods meeting. They have a community gardens meeting. They have like a nutrition related meeting. So it brings together folks from like Wayside, Good Shepherd Food Pantry, the Locker Project, Portland Public Schools. I'm usually there. Food Learning, Cultivating Community, kind of all the people locally, and they talk through those needs. So there's I'm actually very impressed by the coordination that they have, and when there's a pressing need, those groups. So we're a piece of that.
Oh, okay.
And we also, as the foundation, did apply for 2 independent grants to fund the food pantry out of Multilingual, kind of above and beyond this mini grant program. We're waiting for responses.
Good to know. Thank you so much. And always, I really appreciate what you do, and keep doing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo. Mr. Youssef.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you so much, Andy. I'm glad you are strong here and great impact in our students. And I'm so glad that Summer Innovation Program came back. How many staff are you looking? I always like to share those information.
Right, for the summer grants. It's the grants are due by midnight of Monday, April 25th. So we only have 2 applications in so far. I've had many conversations with folks who are interested in applying. So I don't know how competitive those are going to be. We don't have special funding that we received for this. So the foundation board has voted to use our unrestricted funds to give these grants. So we've put aside $20,000, and we've set a limit of $750 for an individual applicant or $4,500 for a team that's working together. So I'm assuming we'll give out the full 20,000, but I don't know. So, yeah.
Great work. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and
thank you.
Count on me on the annual event on May 11th.
Super.
And really appreciate the work that you do. Thank you, Chair.
And the Portland High Jazz Combo is going to be playing at that event as well as an added draw.
Thank you, Mr. Youssef. I also will be at the event. Andy, I had a couple of additional questions. Sure. First, on the work engaging families and with Portland Empowered, I couldn't make that meeting, but I'm so grateful and that the work is underway. I, prior to being on the board, was a co-chair of the Reiki PTO, and just wanted to reflect on how hard it is to get out of the fundraising cycle in that role. There's to step away from providing the school resources that it's had is really tricky. And so there's a lot of pressure, not only to keep up the fundraisers that the PTO has traditionally done, but to bring in more money. So, and that does take, based on on my own experience, it takes up a lot of the time. Many of the parents working on the PTO are doing it on top of all their other obligations. And so it just takes a lot of the airspace. So it's wonderful to hear about the work overall. I think it's very important. And then also to hear you're talking about the potential to take some of that fundraising pressure off of individual PTOs and figure out if it can be done through the foundation. It's great to hear. So appreciative of that work. I'm interested in terms of you're joining the National Association of Educational Foundations and having just come from a planning meeting. I'm wondering if you're finding that the work that other foundations supporting their public schools are doing is similar to the core work that we're doing here in Portland.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm still pretty new to it, but especially from the other board members of the organization, I think there are like 700 foundations that are members. It was actually very reassuring to see how much, in fact, we were aligned. A lot of the education foundations do a range of kinds of teacher grants. A lot of them do racial equity work. I'm actually meeting, I think it's tomorrow. No, it's next week, with the executive director of the Oklahoma City Education Foundation Board with Julia Hazel, because they also are doing an ed tech pipeline to teacher program through their foundation. We're like, we should talk more about that. Wow. So there's some great connections like that. And a range of other, they vary quite a bit, but I'm excited. And so that's one of the pieces around this equity and school-based fundraising, is that I know at least a couple of those education foundations have their PTOs as like chapters or affiliates of their foundation. Mm-hmm. And I need to learn more about how that works to see if that's feasible here.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I don't see any other questions from the board, and I don't have any other questions. Sorry.
Just
Board member
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Burke.
Andy, thanks for all you do. And we look forward to seeing your work in action and joining you for your the Spring for Teachers.
Thanks.
All right. So with that, we are moving on to our board focus. Mr. Superintendent, would you like to introduce this agenda item?
Yes, briefly. Excuse me. Last Saturday, we hosted a summer camp fair at East End Community School to promote the opportunities that we are fortunate to make available to our community this summer. Consistent with our priorities to elevate and center the needs of those whom traditionally have not had access to opportunities available that are available to others, the focus of this early look-in was on our multilingual families. Over 150 families were present, and were able to think in April about what they're going to do for their children in summer when school is out. The value of being able to make informed early choices shouldn't be lost on any of us, but I want to highlight it nonetheless. For multilingual families to be given access to these type of opportunities is consistent with our equity focus as a school district. When we talk about removing systemic barriers, this is an example of what that looks like. Today, we will be updating you more broadly on all of our summer school plans. I will be turning this over to Assistant Superintendent Malia Nally. I'm extremely excited about everything that is being planned for our students and families this year, and this wouldn't be possible without her work and that of her amazing team, who you'll be hearing from tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Malia to tee it up, and then her team will take over.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent. Good evening, everybody. I have just the easy part, which is to introduce the team. And so I am pleased to introduce Nicole Bradeen, who I believe is there in the room. I apologize, I'm not this evening. I think most of you know her, and she is our Summer and Expanded Learning Coordinator. This is a new role that's funded through ESSER to enable us to plan and implement a meaningful summer learning experience that tends to both the academic and SEL needs of our community. I can say it's been a game changer to have someone with such a rich background in expanded learning work who is able to focus fully and early on planning and preparing to run a truly robust summer learning experience. Nicole's there this evening, along with several others, to share a progress update on where we are at with planning and preparing for the summer. You'll hear in her update about the innovations and improvements that the team has been able to pull off already by having this dedicated focus on the summer work. I also want to acknowledge that the team who came before, namely Molly Myers and Gail Cressy, along with many principals, APs, teachers, and other academic team members, have built an incredible foundation on which we are now able to strengthen and refine what we do and how much we can offer. And this team continues to strengthen and expand the offerings in collaboration with Nicole and so many others. As Gail reminds me, we are running another session of school in the summer, and it takes all departments and roles, from food to transportation to nurses to HR to finance to teachers, administrators, and everyone else to pull it off. I am in awe of everyone's ability to continue running school full time while simultaneously preparing for another version of it just a couple of months away. So I'm going to pass it over to Nicole, who's going to briefly reground us in the overarching vision and strategy, and she'll highlight key improvements as well as invite a few others who I think she'll introduce to share some illustrative examples of what we can all expect this summer. So Nicole, if you want to take it away, and let me know if you were assuming I was going to share my screen or if you plan to do so.
I think if you share your screen, that should work, please. Thank you.
Great. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Great.
Thanks so much, Malia. We're really thrilled to be here to talk about all the different steps of summer. You can see our agenda. We'll be reviewing some pieces from from earlier this year, some evolutions of the program, the district, the school, and the community-based program, the budget, and next steps. Thank you. Sorry about this. Our theory of action is just as last year. If we create varied opportunities that honor learners' immediate and long-term needs, then we can ensure that all learners are seen, challenged, and supported. Our summer strategy is a three-pronged strategy. Also, similar to last year, we have school-based programs, district programs, and community partner programs, where we'll be measuring academics and social emotional learning within each area. So here is a description of what we're doing new for this year. We've expanded and are diversifying our offerings using federal funds. We're deepening our collaboration with community partners and have expanded with several partnerships. We've added some after summer school extended care at elementary school. So if elementary school is from 9 to 1 in the morning, we have aftercare from 1 to 4, and there's programs at each school site. For the middle school, same thing. We've added sports and activities in the afternoon. We've added pre-K and K offerings through community partnerships. We've enhanced some programming in the transitional years. We've added a 6th grade leadership programming, tutoring opportunities, accelerated algebra programming, and enhanced high school options, which Molly will talk about later. We're increasing the coherence and alignment between school year and summer curriculums, increasing our assessment and alignment. And we're moving towards working around shared databases between all the constituencies so we can track our data more cohesively. Similar to last year, we have 3 ways to measure programs through access, engagement, and impact. Our access goal is to increase our numbers of students from 1,650 that we had last year, and we're in the process of enrolling students even as we speak. Our engagement goal is to increase our attendance rates to 80%. On average, we had a 65% attendance rate last year. We'll be doing this by strategically adding staff to help make connections and helping students and families plan for the summer in advance. And we just did that through helping them plan this weekend for summer schools and camp fairs. So we are already ahead of where we were last year. Our impact goal involves creating more ways to share our impact, and I will detail that on the next slide. I'd like to take a moment to introduce Jessie Robinson, who will share some of our work around our academic impacts. This is new this year, and Jessie is going to speak on this for a minute. Thanks, Jessie.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Jessie Robinson, Director of Curriculum Assessment and Instruction. So our goal around academic impact this year is to increase the extent to which we have common curriculum and outcomes. And so all schools will set academic goals for their students based on teacher recommendations, but also sort of a common understanding of the critical standards or skills needed to be prepared for the next grade level. And this is a shift from last year. We're really trying to get more aligned across the district in terms of understanding, what the specific focus for each grade level is. Also getting more consistent in terms of data. So this requires that we use consistent tools, consistent assessment, and consistent data collection. So in math, for example, we'll all be using assessments aligned to our IM curriculum. So that would be standards aligned curriculum with assessments, and also a program called Building Fact Fluency, which focuses on procedural fluency. And then in literacy, we'll be focusing on a claim evidence rubric that helps us assess our rating, as well as a foundational skills assessment. Now, I'll just say that, there'll be some variation, right? Because every program has a different focus. And so, one might focus more on the fluency than on the IM assessment. But overall, we'll have hoping to have more consistency across the schools to be able to measure if our programs are effective and if our students learned what we set out to teach them. So excited about that coherence and that collaboration. We also have a consistent database where we have sort of all of our invites and enrollment for tracking the data that comes in, and also this will support students and families in choosing camps around our prioritized programs. Back to you, Nicole.
Thank you, Jessie. Yes, we will have several databases that will be tracking both different programs, school district and community partners, and working together to more cohesively track our data. With regards to social emotional impact goals, we're working in partnership with Chris Reiger, Gavin Goodall, and community partners to develop a more streamlined approach to measuring our social emotional learning goals, which will include using the POSIP tool as well as some of the measures that all of our community partners already use. So really integrating that information as best as we can. So strategy one is our school-based programs. Similar to last year, we have elementary school, middle Sun School, and high school targeted programming based on engagement and recovery. In our elementary schools, we're offering programs at each site. Some of the school programs are combined because of construction, and we're increasing our numbers of seats from 400 to approximately 450 for elementary schools for the year. You can see our elementary school program detail here. East End and Reiki will be together. Rowe, Presumpscot, and Longfellow will be together. Talbot and Lyseth will be together. Ocean and Peaks will be on their own. And many of these programs will also be hosting multiple programs such as Learning Works and Rec as well. So all of our schools will be really busy. I'm going to introduce or let Barb Fletcher speak about a few highlights of the Roe Longfellow and Presumpscot Discovery Learning Camp. Thank
Hi,
you, Barb.
everyone. I'm Barb Fletcher, Roe Principal. Really excited to be here tonight and share some highlights for what's coming with our shared Roe Longfellow and Presumpscot Partnership Discovery Learning Camp. So basically, we're really looking forward to expanding upon and fine-tuning what we know was really successful last summer. It was truly awesome. It was an amazing collaboration and experience. So looking forward to getting our teacher teams assembled and start to do some planning for these 4-week units. We really did a STEM-based design, used a STEM-based approach, last year. And there were multiple design challenges at all of the grade levels. And really focused on integrated learning to make this camp really fun, engaging, exciting for kids. Really just trying to, make kids want to come and give them opportunities to really practice and expand on those things that are really exciting about school during the summer. So here on this slide, you'll see our units all contain driving questions, standards in all of these different content areas, all put together within the units, collaborative group work, final projects, celebrations of learning. We also have an outdoor-based discovery center, which was an integral part of our work last year with kids. It's kind of like their special every week where they would get to work on a lot of those SEL components and do a lot of, kind of reflective work around, them kids, who they are as human beings, but also, how they all interact as a community. So pictures speak louder than words. So on the previous slide that you just saw, these are just some great examples of some of the things that kids experienced last summer. On the previous slide, that was evidence of some boat design and assessing the floatability of the boats down in our river in the back of out behind Rose School. So that was a big project for kids where they were really able to be outside testing their designs that they worked really hard on and engaged with over many, many weeks. And then here, these are just some great examples also of some different design work kids did over the summer. Over on the left-hand side, that's a castle that was created as a magnificent thing with a purpose. You'll see here, we've got some egg examination and a parachute experience happening as part of a design challenge to create some egg protectors that would, secure the eggs from any sort of agitation, dropping, shaking. So kids really worked hard to understand, the inner components of an egg. They hatched some chicks and, created some great ideas for keeping those eggs safe. You'll see some building of purposeful structures outside using all natural components as some collaborative group work outdoors. And then down here on the other side, that's we had a lot of stuff. We had a lot of stuff everywhere where kids could, take different things and different types of materials to do a whole bunch of different creations. Up in the top corner, that was staff day in the beginning when we started doing our planning, and the staff engaged in some STEM challenges as well, just to kind of get our brains thinking about inquiry-based learning with kids. So again, we're really looking forward to inviting and welcoming all of the summer camp learning staff and students back again this summer, as some new and some prior after closing out the school year, and looking forward to another great experience. So hopefully that'll give you some highlights.
Thanks so much, Barb. I look forward to returning this summer and seeing lots of joy and academic integration on the playground. So thank you. Continuing at the secondary level, we'll have Sun School with academics in the morning and activities in the afternoon that will be hosted by athletics and coaches. Molly is going to share some information about high school credit standards and recovery.
Hi, y'all. Molly Myers, I'm the Academic Supports and Transition Coordinator. It's nice to see you all again in person. I just want to reiterate what Malia said, like knowing what this job entails, because I did it last year. Nicole kind of just like landed on a treadmill at full sprint, and she's still running. So she's doing great, and we're already making so many improvements. I'm just so impressed with the work she's doing, and just all the other people that are involved in this, particularly food services, transportation, HR, payroll, finance. I mean, just this is a full working school, and it takes a lot of people. Nicole's taking over quite a bit of the summer, but I couldn't quit high school, and I couldn't quit credit recovery. And I want to I'll give you some context, but we have these 2 more years left of summer funding, and a way to actually use summer funding to really innovate and try to make that innovation financially sustainable after these next 2 summers. And if credit recovery, essentially you fail a course during the year, and then you spend 3.5 weeks in the summer doing pretty much that exact same thing. A lot of students sort of resist it. We really have a hard time getting any teachers to want to work all of July. And we see a lot of students passing credit recovery, but not always finding success again in their next course, that same subject in their next course. So with all these things in mind, I wanted to try to create something new that might kind of help teachers want to teach, and help to design like creative units, standards-based units, high interest units that will make students want to come and make students want to have a different relationship with that subject. And then teachers who know both the students and know that horizon learning, like knowing where they're going to go in the next subject, so that students can feel more efficacious when they arrive in their next course, because the teacher kind of has that in mind. So we are doing high interest, standards long, week-long intensives, 3 hours a day, so you could build in field work and field experiences that are focused both on like really creative ideas, like ways in which students could like find themselves in the subject, and also build that efficacy. So here's some examples. We have an English course on American immigration, really bringing in all the voices of immigrants throughout American history. We have a math course that's designed around Islamic art and architecture. We have a social studies course that's really focused on international current events, but is driven by the social studies standards. You can't really understand Ukraine without understanding the Cold War, without understanding Vietnam. So it'll focus on that. And then we have another science one, and these are just samples. We have a lot of others ones, but on Gulf of Maine crab. So hopefully getting students to draw them in and have a new relationship with that subject and build their efficacy. So that's the larger idea around kind of reimagining credit recovery. Thank you.
Thanks, Molly. I think the enthusiasm goes both ways. The teachers are enthusiastic about what they're teaching, and they share their passions. And in turn, the students both learn and become excited about new ideas. So thank you. Our next strategy 2 is district-based programs. Similar to last year, we have extended school year with special education and language academy. We also have a handful of district programs with some innovations. We have, similar to last year, we also have STEM camp, and new this year is accelerated algebra seminar and rising 6th grade leadership program. The Rising Sixth Grade Leadership Program is will be hosted at Lincoln and is in partnership with Seeds of Peace. And the focus is on building leadership and social emotional skills for rising sixth graders. We are going to have students engage in small groups around projects that they want to, both on around enrichment and academics, based on their student interests and projects that they want to pursue. And in the afternoon, we'll work with Seeds of Peace on leadership skills. So it will actually be a great opportunity for teachers to get trained with Seeds of Peace and to also engage in new leadership skills that they can bring back to their schools. In our current staffing update, we are ahead of where we were last year with over 175 of our 235 staff hired or in process. We're seeking extended school year and language academy staff, although new staff are being hired each day. We're actively working to solve for hiring, collaborating with special ed directors and program coordinators. Strategy 3 will focus on our community partner programs. We have over 30 community partners, and as we mentioned earlier, we hosted a camp fair on Saturday, and we have over 500 seats where we will continue to prioritize those that fall within the income guidelines. Enrollment started Saturday and will be open for the next 3 weeks. Then from May 6th until May 15th, enrollment will be open to anyone regardless of income guidelines. And when I say anyone in Portland Public Schools. At the fair, we had about a third of our seats filled, and we are filling more each day. I already have a wait list of 50 people I need to enroll, so that's great. Oh, sorry. The new for this year with our community partners, sorry about that, was that we created an application process so that partners could apply for funding and seats. And we created programming that was in alignment with needs of our families. So we tried to really extend the days and the breadth of opportunities that people could attend. We launched a common application for families so that families could all apply through one application. Obviously, there was still a need for various programs to create their own, to have additional forms that families had to fill out, but at least we were starting from the same place and could collect all of our data through one application. We have over 500 two-week spots for ages pre-K through 12. So yes. Okay. There are some of our partners, the Telling Room, Maine Audubon, Breakwater, Blue Wave, PESA, Ripple Effect, Sail Maine. Everyone, lots of people wanted to be partners this year, so it was really fantastic. Okay. I am going to turn it over to Gail next, who's going to talk a little bit more about our budget.
Hi, everyone. Excuse me, Gail Cressy, Director of Title I and Academic Resource Strategy. And so just a brief update on where we're at with the budget. Our first strategy was to utilize the remaining SRF2 funds. We had about $900,000 left from what we originally set aside in that application. And so we're going to spend that down first. Our target when we started was 2,500 seats with an average cost of $800 per seat, which would be about $2 million. The budget, we're in development, we're hiring staff, as you heard, we're building curriculum. So the budget currently sits at about 1.67 million. I expect that to get tightened up in the next month or so. And just for reference, last summer we had a little over 2,100 seats at a cost of about 1.4 million. So that's my update on budget.
Thank you, Gail. I rely on Gail for lots of everything numbers, so appreciated. Next steps, we've confirmed dates, locations, and site programs for each program, which is fantastic. We're in the process of fleshing out some of the program details, continuing to identify and enroll students, confirm budgets, and hire staff. We are continuing every day to communicate our opportunities to families and match students with partners in our community partner program. And we have an amazing team of multilingual staff and interpreters to help with this process. So I'm so appreciative of all their energy, patience, enthusiasm that was present on Saturday. That's all I have for now. If you have any questions, I welcome them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. What questions do the board have? Board Member Burke, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. First, just whoa, all this work. Thank you, everyone, and special thank you to you, Nicole. And also to echo, I think we all rely on Gail for unmatched knowledge of title programs, numbers, and budgets. So thank you, Gail. You make what's painful not.
Yes.
I have a couple questions just to understand a few things that you touched upon, like with consistent data. If Jesse's still with us, the language that was being used there was like really high up the ladder of abstraction. And I'm just wondering if you could explain it to me like I'm a third grader, what we were talking about there.
Sure. Am I back on? Yeah, there I am. So I'll take math. So essentially every, the math coaches came together or actually we've been talking to the math coaches quite a bit, but the goal is to have all the math coaches sort of provide some guidance to schools around what is the major work of the grade that, we recommend focusing on in the summertime. And so let's say for rising fifth graders, it's adding fractions, unit fractions, which is a unit in the fourth grade, right? And so let's say those schools are focused on that particular unit. And so all of the schools would teach that particular unit, and we would have a way to assess all the students on that unit, and we would collect that data in one spreadsheet. Gavin, also magic maker when it comes to numbers, would then be able to roll up that data and give us some data on how students learned that particular unit in the summertime. So it's not perfect because we don't have, it's not a super long amount of time. So we can't give a standardized assessment on all fourth grade standards. It has to be really focused on one or two big standards. But we think that it'll be much more consistent than in the past, and we'll be able to assess students on actual grade level content through the curriculum that we're using, which is standards aligned and grade level aligned. So that's the plan. And like I said, is that helpful? Okay, good.
Yeah, thank you.
And I might just add to sum that up sort of in a nutshell. Jesse, I think you did a great job. But last year, we didn't have a clear sense of the types of goals people were setting, how they were assessing if we made them, nor did we have a way to collect the data consistently to have a strong sense of whether or not kids learned what we taught and got what we wanted. And so this year, we now have more clarity around how to approach setting academic and SEL goals that are more consistent tools for measuring whether or not kids met the goals, and a more centralized place to collect that information so we can do data analysis.
Thank you, Malia. And just one more point I may add. So we're also just offering choices with curriculum that we know has been successful, different ideas that they can use that can either apply across science, English, and math, or ideas that are, straight from IM or the Building Back Fluency program. So very different options that we can then help align on our data.
Okay, thank you. In the same vein, with the social emotional learning impact goal and measurement tool, could someone just offer me an example of what a goal might be and what a tool to measure it might be?
So each community partner has their own measurements of what they're considering their social emotional goals. So one might be, in alignment with CASEL standards, it might be increasing self-confidence or increasing self-awareness. So I'm in the process of understanding what all the community partners already measure, and then working to figure out what it is. Is it in addition to attendance, is it that you learn something new about your community? Is it that you felt you gained new confidence? Is it you made new friendships? And so really thinking about what is the one skill that kind of threads through the community partners to that we can then track, whether that's because they're already tracking it for their own grants, or whether we bring it all together and track it in our unique system. We will be tracking the data, but just trying to figure out how it all aligns.
Got it. Thank you. Are there any programs that are happening this summer that are garden focused, like garden camps?
So the Maine Audubon, as you may know, is actually located in Falmouth. And so there's a small camp there in August that is focused on the outdoors. Over here in Portland, we have several programs that are working in the outdoors. So we have Rewild Maine is doing outdoor programs. Mayo Street is doing outdoor programs. The Root Cellar and Rewild Maine are doing a program that is focused on the outdoors. And every school-based program has an outdoor component of science that we're also integrating some rubrics around.
Yeah, thanks. I was particularly curious at our school sites, just since particularly elementary schools have so much garden infrastructure, and we've had the specials running at some of them. There's opportunity to extend that.
Yeah, I think specific garden-based curriculum will be handled at the school site, but in terms of outdoors and nature, we have a lot of good things.
Yeah, I like that, of course.
I can speak on high school. The amazing Katie West and Brooke Teller got a REV grant, and so I'm working with them. We're going to add 2 more right now, but there's one already in place that's going to be English, and the theme is adventure. So it's sort of incorporating English with rock climbing, I don't know, all the different things, but every day there's going to be this adventure, and then there's some riding component, and then there's the Gulf of Maine crabs, and then there's a lake ecology course for 3 days. And then there's another thing happening at East End through Gulf of Maine Research Institute, where they're going to walk to the water, and also scientists are going to visit them with I think this was a fish head, and sort of like talking about like a fish head. So like learning from like actual scientists in the field. So there's a lot of those kinds of things happening too.
Awesome. And then I have I guess it's an unsolicited comment, but I'm curious. I love the examples that you gave for some of the credit recovery and high school level units. I'm curious if you've explored like hip hop education or looked at the equity centered community design framework for opportunities there too.
For the elementary programs, Mayo Street Arts is doing some dance. And I'll be really honest, I don't know exactly what type of dance it is, but I'm going to learn, because I know I need to learn how to improve my dance skills. Let me tell you. The other piece is that I totally draw a blank.
So, I think I'm continuing to recruit teachers and find ideas. I think my big thing is to try to get this off the ground, and it's something that, so I'm less sort of promoting like this is a specific thing. Teachers are getting paid to make the curriculum. So one of the ways I'm trying to make this sustainable is that we have like made curriculum for future summers beyond ESSER. But certainly, there are already teachers who are sort of thinking around like actually asking students what they want to learn and researching that and then designing around that. So
cool.
That's where we're
Couldn't ask for
starting.
anything better than that right there, asking students what they want to learn and design around that. Yeah. So thank you. Those are my clarifying questions, and none of them are critical. Part of them are just clarifying and part of them are just curiosities, but really, really excited for what you've pulled together and look forward to what's next.
Thank you. I just thought of the other partner, Portland Youth Dancers has really been one partner that they really, really want to do some hip hop dance with our kids. So finding a way to bring them in.
Right on. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Burke. Ms. Bondo, if you could wait one moment, I'm going to go to Mr. Youssef. Mr. Youssef.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, the whole team. I really appreciate the work that you guys doing. My question has been asked by Board Member Burke. The reimagining credit recovery is the example that you gave is very important. My question was, is that equivalent to the classes that the students fail?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do, this is where at each school it's a little bit different. Depending on how standards align they are, so we're changing it so to be credit/standards recovery. The idea being that if students have achieved certain standards, they learn the standards that they haven't achieved over the summer. But the credits are being, so right now, last year it was 15 days, about 1.5 hours a day. So essentially a week-long intensive is about half that, just to have more hours in front of students and longer time during the day. So if with 2 intensives, it's an equivalent of one of former credit recovery, essentially. But again, I think the idea is to sort of move more towards finding where students are and that they're not having to repeat the entire class over the summer, but you can find where they need to learn, and then thinking about the essential standards for their next course so that they arrive in Algebra 2 with some sense of efficacy, that they're not still feeling like they're drowning in their next math course.
Oh, thank you, Mommy. Thank you. In terms of the hiring the staff, we have current 175. Are you guys hopeful to get that number? And what is the alternative if you don't have the 235, I think, the total?
So, every day we're bringing new people on board, whether it's just talking to people through word of mouth or encouraging them or being creative about, if we have to split up some of the positions because people had plans or going away. So we're doing that. We're working with HR and with our team here every day on that. We are ahead of where we were, and I'm working specifically with the special ed directors this week to come up with a evolving strategy to help make sure that we get those needs in place. Their caseloads and enrollment lists are coming out at the end of the week, so we'll be able to fit the pieces of the puzzle together very soon.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful. Yeah, go ahead.
I will say one last thing. In terms of credit recovery, we used to struggle to get 8 teachers to work credit recovery. And I have 21 teachers ready to offer credit recovery intensives and more who are interested. And I'm just working with them on topics and student need and things like that. So, in a positive way, I'm very heartened by what's happening there.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful. One last question for, I think, Gail. And summer 21, I think you said we use 1.67 million. Are we expecting to use almost double of that amount this summer?
So we used about 1.4 last summer. We're not going to double that, but we did approach schools and programs with ambitious but achievable goal of expansion. So we're already, the plans that we have now already exceed what we did last summer, both in terms of opportunities for students and then of course in terms of cost. But we also have some cost savings because of launching some curriculum last year that can be reused. So it's not going to, we have some cost savings and then we are also expanding, which will affect the bottom line this summer.
Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for the hard work, and looking forward to see those beautiful programs in the summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Youssef. Ms. Bando.
Thank you. Most of our questions were already answered, but I have two questions on the academic impact goals. So I don't know who I need to Nicole.
We can both,
right.
Jump in.
So on the first one about the goal. So for the curriculum and the academic goals, I tried to go to that. Where? There you go. For the academic goals for the students. So I'm trying to figure out, because when I look at that, I try to look at the trend and the direction, then how to measure the curriculum to the outcomes. So I try to imagine, because when I see then a teacher's writing a goal for a student, so I know writing a goal is not only writing the goal is going to bring the achievement to the student. So it's mostly the activities that the student will participate, have more influence to go to the achievement. So I'm thinking about that. Just look at the picture, then the teachers building a goal, writing a goal. So now the activities related to those goals should be done by the teacher, or the curriculum team will make those activities happening. So the student can be able to participate and then, increases those achievements.
I think I can comment on that. There's, as you nicely stated, there's actually a lot of people that are part of helping make that goal, because we're looking at input from current teachers and coaches alongside data. And that's how students are recommended for summer school and how we invite them. And then we work with the current administrators and then the summer site coordinators who might be in slightly different roles in the summer than they are during the year. And then we work with middle school teaching strategists to bring their insight into this. And so we really look at what students are doing now and what their needs are. And then we make sure that all of those constituencies are aligned and that the teachers who are on the ground teaching summer school have best recommendations. And so our activities we're offering, for example, in math, we're offering the IM kits or the IM program, and then the building fact fluency kits. So teachers have enough skills and standards to choose from in alignment with the recommendations, so that the kids are getting what they need, and then we're able to measure it.
So the summer is just 1 month, right? Activities?
Yes.
So for me, it's just a long-term process. So we can measure those outcomes from those activities from the summer school.
Yes, we're in the process of building that. Yes.
Okay.
Malia, did you want to say something else? Sorry.
No, I thought you articulated it really well, Nicole. I mean, I think, Mickey, we will have assessments that we give at the end of the summer to measure, that are aligned to the standards that we're trying to teach to, that will measure the growth over the summer, so we can better understand if students learned what we were hoping they would learn by giving them this additional time and support.
Okay. And then when we got those standards, so we're bringing back to to the teachers, right? So they can build more learning strategies for each student. So I just, the point that I want to make here is just the follow-up to be able to measure success, then those activities being so successful and really increasing the academic achievement, because that's about the reason why we're making those summer programs. So I just want to see the next step, like you mentioned, Malia. Then exactly, we do some assessment after the summer school. So and then those assessments have to go to the teachers or the curriculum team to assess and to analyze, and then giving some suggestion how to move the student to the different level.
Yeah, so at the end of the summer, the teachers teaching summer school will administer the assessments. And Jesse spoke to some of the examples, like a writing rubric, a foundational literacy skills assessment, or items pulled from the illustrative math curriculum that are aligned to the standards that a given teacher or program will focus on.
Right.
And then we'll put that data into a more consistent tracking tool. So we have a better understanding. You might remember last year we had just a big aggregate pie chart that told us the percent of students overall that met the goal that we had for the summer, but everybody set goals differently and assessed them differently. So it was hard to tease out the specifics. And so the change this year is to have a more common approach to identifying standards, setting those goals, assessing whether or not kids met them, and then collecting that data. I think a key point that either I'm hearing in your comments and or that your comments are bringing up for me is also how we share that information and data back with the school year teacher, right? Because we don't want this to be just like an isolated thing off in the summer that happens and, nobody knows about it. So if you're a receiving teacher, it's probably important to know these 10 kids in my class went to summer school, worked on these standards, and here's where they got over the summer. And so I think that is something that, as Nicole and Jesse have mentioned, this evening is just a progress update as to where we are in planning and preparing. So I would say we have not fully built out the vision for that, but we understand that's ultimately what we want to do is have this summer experience, just like Molly said at the secondary level as well, be cohesive and integrated with the full learning experience for the students. So communicating that information back in the fall is a piece of that process as well that hasn't been, I think individual schools do that in different ways, but we haven't had a systematic way to do that before. But again, this evening is just letting you all know, just giving a little transparency into where we are in process, but by no means are we complete with all of our design plans for this.
All right. Thank you, Maria. That really makes sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you. And just one more thing. There are some literacy coaches who have some really good thoughts on building that system. So we definitely want to be able to bring it back to September. So thank you so much for highlighting that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that is going to happen to all levels, all grades. From elementary school to high school, right?
That's our goal. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So my last question on the school-based credit recovery. How are you? So I heard Ms. Yusuf ask those questions. So I just want to understand with the no in-person during COVID. So I know that nationally we have a really high rate on the failure of the courses because a lot of students, they were not in person. So I heard a couple of things then from the high school. So I wonder, because when I look at nationally, some of the districts I try to do for the school-based recovery, really customizing their own options. Putting the student-centered learning on those areas. So what do you think about those different approach? Then if you can give some example, then we have personalized our own options for the school-based recovery.
I'm sorry, I know that I don't understand I didn't get the specific question.
If you have any sample, any customizing, because, I know a lot of districts are doing their own after the COVID, they're doing their own personalizing and customizing on the different options. Yeah. On the school recovery base, instead of using the same traditional ways than it used to be before the COVID.
Yes, that's what it's not per student personalized, which I think is really hard to move from where we are to personalize. But I do think like this idea of a more like high interest, week-long intensive is the beginning of moving, like at least for summer, more towards that personalized learning. And I think it's interesting to see, like, as I've been planning this, it's there's still a lot of the schools have like built-in systems of credit recovery based on their schedules. So in some ways, I don't know that we'll see the numbers from last year. In some ways, we might see the same number of failure rates because of the built-in, like based on their schedules and how they can build in a student retaking a class. So, but I do think getting teachers to experience week-long credit like intensives and think about what they could do, and then thinking about, my big vision would be like polling students at the, like seeing who needs it, and then seeing what they want to learn, and seeing how we can match what they want to learn with the standards of the discipline and those horizon standards of where they want to go. But we're just starting.
So can we combine like the online recovery, because some schools are using the online recovery baseline and or in person. So can we balance those two options?
That kind of happens every summer. We use Edmentum, and so there's at Deering they have a handful of students who use Edmentum online recovery software, and that's fairly customizable by standards, not necessarily like by student interest, but by standards. Casco does the same thing, where they find a student, finding a student. So all of this is about like what's going to work for different students, and like an online class for some students just won't work. And some students that's going to be ideal for reasons of like work or like what they want to do. So that's been, Edmentum's have been a part of summer for the last, at least as far as I've been part of summer.
Yeah. So when you were talking, I was thinking about all the time when we look at about the school-based recovery, we see students who fail. So I just think about then how about teachers? So I mean, when you see the teachers are teaching, those are moving to those learning process to the student. So are we having some strategy to empower teaching, our teacher to reteach our student until they gain proficiency?
I again, I aspire to at least this moving to improve credit recovery and figuring out more ways to meet students. Like the specific strategy for needs is like where we're headed. And that's certainly my vision of it as well. But so like to the extent that we can do that this year, thinking about who these students are and what they need. So we're just pulling the student lists now and starting to see like what this course would look like and who these humans are in this course and what these humans need, in a way that we're so far ahead of where we, credit recovery is hard because you don't know a student's failing until June sometimes, and so like being able to be reactive, but we're putting together lists now of like possibilities. And so we can start to like design courses around the possible students to respond to those needs. But I think that's kind of where that's the best innovation we can get for this summer, with the idea of like trying to move somewhere else next summer in a place that's sustainable after that.
All right. So I put note on my book note here. Then I would like to see some updates, and I will call on you.
Okay. I appreciate it. I can't wait.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo. Ms. Diu.
I just wanted to know, what is Sun School? In particular, I'm just very new to this.
Nope, we have a lot of terms, so thank you for asking. Sun School is the middle school Sun School. So it specifically was named, and maybe someone in here named it.
No, I think it came up from like a Casco name.
Okay. So it's the middle school summer school essentially. And it's essentially for kids who are behind. They're invited, and we've tried to make it more engaging by providing afternoon sports and activities.
Okay. And then the other thing, when I read last year, there was quite a bit of attendance issues. Like what if, other than doing things that the students would be interested in, are there other engagement things that you're working on?
Yes. So we're really strategically, I'm working with Chris Reiger, who's overseeing the social workers and what we're calling outreach coordinators, to help match students with the programs and to, encourage them, if they're not attending, to encourage them to show up or to create a proactive plan. I did some of this last year with the community partners, and it definitely takes some planning and execution. And so we're just trying to be more strategic about that. We're also offering things like tutoring alongside with Portland Housing Authority in study centers in the neighborhoods, so that students don't have to go anywhere. So we're making little improvements that will hopefully increase attendance, in addition to just planning ahead and helping families schedule and block out their time so that they know what the expectations are.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I would just also say about Sun School is standards, like seeing which standards students didn't achieve during the year and trying to meet those standards so that a student can leave school feeling accomplished is kind of the larger idea of Sun School. And then another thing I'd say about attendance is one of the places where we see students not attending is in the first few days of a program. So getting this far ahead with thanks to Nicole, and being able to invite students and communicate with students and using our multilingual interpreters and all of that I think will help a lot, getting students there the first day of school and then having a positive experience and wanting to come back. So.
Great. Thank you.
And then one more strategy is that I created more partnerships for students in August after summer school. And so they didn't feel like they were missing out on camp in July, but that they could still attend a fun camp in August. So hopefully that'll increase attendance.
Thank you, Ms. Dio. Ms. Russell-Better.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, just how phenomenal the program is. Just the breadth and depth that you all have created is just really mind-blowing. So thank you for all your work. I just had a brief question, because it seemed really clear to me, most of the programming, that there were academic needs largely that kids would qualify. And I was just curious about the Rising Sixth Grade Leadership Program and the STEM camp. Are students at all identified for, by social workers for social emotional needs? Or I guess the STEM wouldn't be, but for that, I was just curious if there were other criteria that students might be referred besides the academic needs.
I'll speak to the Rising Sixth Grade program because that was something that I've always wanted to do. I did it in California and brought the concept here. And so I'm still working on some of those details, but the idea was that we're going to work on an assets-based program that allows students to bring their interests and needs around enrichment and academics into a leadership academy. And we knew that there was a need for some rising sixth graders. So I'm still evolving the finer points, but it's really to incorporate student voice and leadership. Okay. The STEM camp is also, it's going to be for students who are obviously interested in pursuing STEM, in addition to teacher recommendations. And that is for rising sixth graders as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Russell-Better. I just had a couple of additional questions. You've alluded to different aspects of it, but if you can talk a little bit more about how we're connecting students to specific programs, that would be helpful. I don't feel I understand some students are invited to some programs, but just bigger picture, if you can talk about that.
Mm-hmm. So Grace and her team have been really great about, every time it feels like sometimes we're adding programs to accommodate the needs, which is great. And so they've been great about, okay, let's upload this information on the website, let's upload that. And so all of us here right now are great about, okay, let's make sure that admin know what the opportunities are. Let's make sure site coordinators know. Let's make sure teachers know, social workers, parent community specialists know, so that people who are on the ground working directly with kids are able to say, hey, we have this great soccer camp, or hey, I heard you were invited to Sun School and we really want you to attend, and let's build a fun plan around after that. So our hope that through all these communications is that kids are hearing about the summer opportunities and are thinking of them as opportunities as opposed to deficits. And I know that many people are speaking of them really highly because they are engaging. So really the big way that we're communicating is through the website, the staff and community newsletter, and then there's individual invites to all of the programs if the school or district based. There's some where teachers are recommending them or inviting them, and then there's some that we have to push out a little bit more because, for example, the affinity groups or the STEM camp or the accelerated math program. We're working on ways of making sure that the kids know how to get involved with these, and that all got launched in the past few weeks.
I would just add that something that's an improvement this year is a centralized spreadsheet, which we've always aspired to. Hopefully Molly and Gail are smiling at that. But because we haven't had full-time year-round dedicated staff, it's been hard to get ahead of the curve on that. And so now every single school has all of their students listed with columns to indicate if a student's invited to a school-based program, a district-based program, and for us to understand if they're in a community program. And that's to help coordinate for all of us, including, the folks in the multilingual team, an understanding of when kids are invited to which programs that are designed to help them on specific academic skills versus when they might have openings in their summer where they might be able to access something like a community program. So that's a coordinated effort for all schools, and then for us centrally to have visibility into all of those invitations for each school.
Excellent. That sounds awesome. And then on transportation, can you talk a little bit about if we're providing transportation into what I assume maybe to some district programs, and then are community partners able to offer, are any community partners offering transportation? I'll just say that I was on the website while during this presentation looking just what's on the website about summer school, and saw that one of the community partners is Maine Surf Camp, and I love that the location was the ocean. And so I'm just wondering how kids get to the ocean.
Sorry, I'm laughing. So Maine Surf Camp actually is one of the partners that provide transportation. They're based on the students who are enrolling and where they live. They were going to decide upon one specific location and actually bring them back and forth because we knew that was a need. Now, unfortunately, that's not the case for every community partner. Some we've had a lot of conversations around walking school buses with parents being, given individualized directions on how to get from point A to point B on the metro. We're really trying to think out of the box. Transportation is a constraint, has been this year and will continue to be this summer. And so, we're using transportation with the Boys and Girls Club. We've combined, we've collaborated with them to provide some transportation for that program. And all of our elementary schools, ESY, Language Academy will have transportation as well. And then high school students will be on the metro. High school students will be on the metro, and middle school will also have transportation, except for specialized transportation. Yeah. And then Learning Works also has transportation, and they're located at 3 of our sites as well.
And then am I correct to believe that we're maybe, I don't know, like 5 weeks ahead of where we were last year? Something of that, in that ballpark. It's great to see how much of this is at the point where we're, enrolling students at this point with the summer still, a ways away. I see that Miss Billio has her hand up, so I'm going to go to Miss Billio. Miss Billio, I'm sorry if I didn't see your hand earlier.
It's okay. I'm just a bit tired. Thank you for the presentation. It was really informational. I just had question about community partnership and if you guys are going to utilize opportunities like SNAP Ed and Let's Go to also kind of meet some of those needs. I know they provide cooking classes and physical education resources and information like that that a lot of kids can utilize. Is that something that is, or that you guys are thinking about?
So always happy to have new resources integrated. When we think about community partners, most of the current partners we're working with can provide at least a week of like full day programming for our kids. Again, not averse to working with new partners to provide resources insight. That's only going to help our programs. I'd be happy to get those resources from you and talk to you more about that. But yeah, when we talk about community partners for this sense, it's those that are providing full day programming.
Okay, so you like essentially would be able to send a group of kids to their like full program. Is that how you partner?
That's how we're defining community partners right now. A community partner for the sake of like the camp fair was a program that could provide a program for kids all day for a week at least. Although some programs are providing programming for after summer school in the afternoons. So yeah, either half a day or a full week.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, I was a Let's Go coordinator as a while back, and we did classes at Learning Works. So that would be essentially the same route for those kids to get that opportunity.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to learn more. There's so many amazing partners in the city, some of which I don't know as much about. So I'm happy to look into it. Thank you.
Thanks for answering my question. And I yield back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Bilyeu. With that, I don't see any additional questions from the board. I just want to, Ms. Bondo, please go ahead.
Yes, that's a question. I missed that question. So the after summer school extended care on the elementary school. So I just wonder, those are just for the student who really attend the summer school. Do we have enough spots or is also as the person will be qualified people? So just to understand as the way those extended care will be, because it's been a huge demand. So are we stay just for the summer student or are we open up also for the siblings or families?
So right now, we have small programs at each site, and we're in the process of it. Once families are confirmed that they're going to attend summer school, I'm going to work with the admin and teachers to have them recommend prioritized students in the after summer school programs. And so we don't unfortunately have room for every single child in a program. And that's just because of limitations, both on space and honestly, it was a really big push to get partners to come in and do half-day programs. And I don't know if it has to do with staffing, but I asked a lot of people to come in and work and they were bound by several logistical hurdles. So we do have, so prioritize families. So I'm really relying on administrators or social workers or parent community specialists to recommend certain families who need the after summer school childcare, as in they can't attend summer school unless they have that after school program. And so right now we're still making sure we know who's attending summer school, but as soon as we know that, that's the next step right after break is saying, okay, this family should really be prioritized in the after summer school spots.
Okay, right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo. Ms. Diu.
I was wondering if you had a wait list for if someone no-shows, because like last year, just the percentage, it was like 158 students that didn't show. I know, so I was just wondering if you had any waiting list for students if someone didn't show.
Yes. And that definitely happens, whether it's due to COVID or just conflicts. We have waiting lists for for several of our programs, we already have waiting lists. So I'm checking in with partners daily and seeing who's not coming or who can't come because of a conflict, and contacting families on the spot and saying, oh, there's an opening. So that work happens like every few hours on any given day in the summer.
Thank you so much. I just want to again appreciate the breadth of offerings, the creativity and thinking outside the box, the re-envisioning, both such as with the high school credit recovery program, but also just re-envisioning I know that it started during COVID, but our relationship with community partners. I mean, it's I think that is incredibly significant. The scale of this effort is a little bit mind-boggling. So appreciate that it is such a team, and that that we're undertaking so much in the summer. And I just want to thank you all for your efforts. And I'm really optimistic about what's to come for our students. So I'm really looking forward to continuing to hear about this as we get closer to the summer. So thank you. And with that, we are going to move to our to new business, and we have one first read. It's first read of the District Advisory Building Committee recommendation to reallocate project reserves to cost overruns. And as the superintendent spoke to during his remarks at the beginning of the meeting, we will hear more about this at our next board meeting. We're not doing a workshop today. The district level advisory building committee first needs to meet. Okay, so with that, we are ready to adjourn. Just noting that our next meeting is on Tuesday, May 3rd. I hope everyone has a good school vacation week next week. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn? Board Member Burke, seconded by Board Member Russell Better. All in favor, just with a show of hands. It's unanimous, and we are adjourned at 9:01 p.m. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good night.